Two major stories breaking tonight, one involving a monster storm that's impacting much of the U.S. East Coast, and another involving big developments that could change the trajectory of the White House race. Welcome to the Kelly File. I'm Shannon Bream in for Megyn Kelly. Tonight, the Clinton campaign is once again in damage control mode after the FBI releases new details about her server scandal, raising serious new questions about the investigation and what some feel was an incomplete investigation by the FBI. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first to the deadly tropical storm Hermine, which raced across the state of Florida, leaving heavy damage in its wake. Tonight, a tropical storm warning is in effect all the way from Georgia to New Jersey. Amtrak has canceled some service. Roads are flooded. Hundreds of thousands are still without power, and multiple states of emergency are in effect. The storm is expected to make its way across North Carolina tonight, and that is where we find Joel Waldman reporting tonight from Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Hi, Joel.
Shannon, good evening to you. Your timing on live television is impeccable because over the last hour or so, the wind's really picking up here in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And although you can't see it behind me, you can see the sand dunes, but behind that, obviously, the mighty Atlantic Ocean, and those waves really starting to kick up. Now, you combine that with about 10 inches of rain that they are expecting, along with 1 to 3 feet of storm surge and upwards of 50-mile-an-hour winds, and that is a major problem potentially with coastal flooding. So a lot of people have already taken off. The governor here in North Carolina has said better to be over-prepared so that we are underwhelmed, and you're really seeing people heed that advice. But obviously, this is the Labor Day weekend. It is a big money weekend for the hotels down here and obviously other tourist attractions. But in talking to people, about a third of these people have actually canceled their bookings. So that is thousands of tourists that are not coming here. A lot of hotel rooms empty, and because of that, a lot of restaurants empty, and obviously people not going into the stores to buy merchandise and things of that nature. Meanwhile, the Emergency Operations Center is open and ready for business. The governor is hoping they won't have to use it, but they do have National Guardsmen on standby and Humvees to get people out in case of major flooding. But as you can tell right now, and I know it's a little bit harder on the television to see it, but the wind's really starting to whip up coming off the East Coast. And of course, the fear now is that this storm could head up north, pick up more steam in the Atlantic cities in the Northeast, like New York City. But Shannon, for now, I will send it back to you. You enjoy yourself in that warm, cozy,
I know. Please be careful
studio
out there. We really appreciate you're on the scene reporting, but stay safe. Thanks, Joel.
We will.
All right, so what is next? Chief Meteorologist Rick Reichmuth is live in the Fox Weather Center. He's tracking all of the Hermine moves, where it is now, where it could be next, how it could affect your holiday weekend. Hi, Rick.
Hey there, yeah, especially when it kind of stops moving, and that's where we're going to feel the big impacts over the next couple of days. We're probably going to be talking about Hermine until Wednesday, I would say, which is not good news for a lot of people across the east. The center probably right there around the Myrtle Beach area at this point. But tonight, we're going to be under the gun here across a lot of North Carolina and in around the Outer Banks where John just was. Tornado concerns until midnight. At least this watch is in effect till midnight. I think we'll see another one issued later on. But we're going to see very heavy rain, an additional probably 6 to 8 inches of rain. Because of that, we're going to see some more flooding. We have flash flooding going on down across parts of southeastern North Carolina. Flood watches in effect really for a lot of the state and up towards around Norfolk, Virginia. This is the track, and over about the next 24 hours, we're certain this storm is going to move in this direction. Then it gets back over water, and the water here out across the north part of the Atlantic, or the mid-Atlantic, is a lot warmer than normal, and it very likely is going to go right around the Gulf Stream. Water's very warm there, and it will give it the strength, likely to strengthen again, maybe back up to a hurricane-strength storm, getting very close here around the Delmarva or the New Jersey coastline. We're expecting to see a prolonged event here. We have tropical storm watches in effect, warnings through New Jersey, watches in effect the Connecticut coastline, and we're going to be watching a prolonged event of very strong winds. We're going to see a very significant storm surge for about 2 to 3 days across the Jersey Shore especially. A lot of coastal erosion, a lot of flooding. We have a really dangerous situation on our hands, likely till Tuesday to Wednesday, Shannon.
All right, let's hope folks heed your warning. Rick, thank you for the updates. Also breaking tonight, for the fourth time since the Clinton email scandal broke, the government has dumped a big load of news on a holiday weekend, only serving to reinforce the criticism that there's something they're hiding. Earlier today, the FBI released a summary of its July interview with Hillary Clinton involving allegations that classified information was stored on her personal server, potentially putting national security at risk. You'll recall, of course, the FBI did not recommend charges against the former Secretary of State. The Clinton campaign has been quick to react, saying that her use of the private account was a clear mistake, but the documents show that there was no basis to move forward with a legal case against her. Her critics don't agree. Donald Trump saying he doesn't understand how she was able to get away from being prosecuted. What's more, the documents raise further questions about Mrs. Clinton's repeated claims that she handed over everything that was work-related.
I responded right away and provided all my emails that could possibly be work-related. We went through a thorough process to identify all of my work-related emails and deliver them to the State Department. At the end, I chose not to keep my private, personal emails. Emails about planning Chelsea's wedding or my mother's funeral arrangements, condolence notes to friends, as well as yoga routines, family vacations, the other things you typically find in inboxes.
I think that anybody who's actually looked at this has concluded that I have now put out all of my emails.
Okay, we now know that's not the whole truth, and that the FBI did, in fact, recover more than 17,000 emails that were never handed over. Those emails are said to be a mix of both work-related and personal messages. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge reports from Washington on what else we've learned. Catherine?
This 11-page FBI summary of Hillary Clinton's July 2nd interview shows the former Secretary of State could not remember key details about her emails more than 24 times. Clinton told FBI agents she could not recall when she got a security clearance. Clinton could not recall briefings or training on the handling of classified information. And Clinton could not recall specialized training for the U.S. government's most closely held secrets, known as special access programs. Critics aren't buying it.
This is a case of special rules. You know, Mrs. Clinton operates under one set of rules, and the rest of the federal government operates under another set.
The same week Clinton became Secretary of State, she also signed 2 non-disclosure agreements where she said she knew the rules and that violating these agreements could result in criminal charges. Clinton told the FBI that she could not recall the details surrounding the 2009 setup of the ClintonEmail.com domain, whose servers were housed at their Chappaqua, New York home. Clinton said the personal email account was a matter of convenience. FBI agents do not appear to press Clinton on the issue, further reinforcing Republican criticism of the FBI director and the investigation.
My takeaway was this. Remember, James Comey said she was not indicted because he didn't have sufficient evidence on the issue of intent. She said she did it for convenience, but I didn't see the follow-up questions in the interview I read.
The heavily redacted FBI summary also shows Clinton was questioned about the 22 top-secret emails, too damaging to release for national security reasons, which include the drone campaign as well as human spying for CIA programs. A separate document providing a case timeline shows 13 of Clinton's mobile devices are unaccounted for, and without a forensic examination, the FBI couldn't say whether they were hacked. Shannon?
All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you so much. Joining us now, David Wall, an attorney and Trump supporter, Alan Colmes, host of The Alan Colmes Show on Fox News Radio, and Guy Benson, townhall.com political editor and a Fox News contributor. All right, Alan, I'll start with you because we have many new revelations here, and they all point to one thing. Either Mrs. Clinton was not being honest, or as some would say, her critics would say, she is incompetent. She's somebody who wants to be the commander-in-chief, will be handling the most top-secret information in the world. And even though FBI Director James Comey said anybody who is a reasonable person should have known better than exactly what she did.
Well, I don't agree with those either-ors. Number one, the FBI did not indict or did not recommend indictment.
But
number
he
two,
did say that she did an extremely careless job with this, and that any reasonable person, she was a cabinet secretary, should have known better.
Two is that we have no new information here. This is what the FBI already did. They already looked at all.
I didn't know that she had 13 devices plus 5 iPads.
The FBI already, but this is everything the FBI already knew, and the FBI decided there was not enough here, that there's no precedent for going forward. This is basically a political witch hunt at this point. We just saw Trey Gowdy, who had her in front of him for 11 hours and did a horrible job if he's trying to get anything out of her that's indictable. He couldn't come up with anything, and so now he's trying to save grace. I mean, she stood before an 11-hour witch hunt because they probably think she's a witch. And we keep going over this old ground over and over and over again.
But since she testified, Alan, there have been new revelations. They come all the time.
What new revelation?
17,000 emails that we didn't know about before.
It's not new to the FBI. The FBI knew everything that came out today, and they decided
but new to Trey Gowdy, he wouldn't have known that when he was questioning her.
But the FBI, having known all this, decided there was no reason to go forward. This is everything James Comey, a Republican, knew already, and now all of a sudden conservatives are acting as if suddenly all this new information has come out, and that's it. It's much ado about nothing.
Us. It was new to the congressional. It would be new to Trey Gowdy and the other people.
Congress had 11 hours to question her, and they didn't come up with anything.
But they didn't have half the information they have now.
11 hours. They didn't come up with anything.
David, you're an attorney, and Alan makes a great point. The FBI had all of this. James Comey, the FBI director, has been a very respected inspector and prosecutor and person over the years. He said not enough to indict, so shouldn't that be the end of it?
When in doubt, Shannon, plead ignorance. I mean, Hillary Clinton has two major allies. She has the Department of Justice, Barack Obama's Department of Justice on her side, and she's got the mainstream media completely in the tank for her. She can't remember a darn thing about those top secret or classified emails. So what does she do? She makes sure she'll never be able to remember anything by scrubbing her illegal server with the bleach bit. This whole scandal, and it's growing and will continue. Makes Watergate look like a parking ticket.
You wish it were growing.
Listen up, Alan.
You wish it were growing.
This is so out of control right now that the American voter, in 1 month from now, the American voter is going to understand, wait a second, Alan, whether or not you want somebody who's so rife with corruption that she can't do a single thing without violating the law.
Guy is waiting
Donald
patiently.
Trump, who has no history of corruption and a lot of great ideas.
Donald Trump
Lord,
has no history of corruption.
I know that Alan wants to jump on that red meat, but let's bring in Guy here to give us a little bit of an outside look at what you think. I mean, looking at what we learned today, because it's new information to us, but as Alan says, it's not to the FBI, and they decided no prosecution.
There are two significant newsworthy revelations in the report that we saw today, which did not coincidentally drop on a Friday before a long weekend. The first of which is that Mrs. Clinton used at least 13 mobile devices during her time at the State Department. Recall that her initial excuse for setting up the private server was that she wanted the convenience of one device. She used 13. Now, she was warned personally and explicitly on 2 occasions that doing official classified business on unsecure BlackBerries was putting sensitive information at risk. She continued to do so anyway. And now we find out today that several, an undisclosed number, but several of those BlackBerries were lost. She lost these cell phones filled with classified information that she wasn't supposed to be using in the first place. That is breathtaking, 1. And 2, this is important as well. With the timeline that is pieced together in the documents that we saw today, Hillary Clinton's team began to purge and scrub her email archives, which were under congressional subpoena at the time, a few weeks after the New York Times first reported the existence of her server. If that is not obstruction or intent, I don't know what is.
Alan, it was described as a blank moment that somebody realized the New York Times was reporting publicly on this stuff. And that's when we got the bleach bit, and that's when we got the deletion of information that could have been relevant.
That Guy seems to know more than James Comey, because James Comey said there was no, if I may finish, said there was no obstruction and there was no intent. Unlike with David Petraeus, for example, where there was intent and there was obstruction. So if the FBI director who did an investigation and said she did not lie to the FBI and could not find intent, which is the basis upon which he decided he would not recommend an indictment, but I guess you know more, Guy.
Okay, very quickly, David, I want to give David a final word here.
Shannon, hold on a second.
I want to give David a final word here and just ask, if Alan, Guy, you or me had done the stuff that's been outlined by James Comey, do you think we would have gotten a pass?
You would be in jail calling my office for a bail hearing. There is no question about it. Hillary Clinton's name is Clinton. That's why she's not in jail. The Department of Justice has her back. It's Barack Obama's Department of Justice. He formally endorsed her as president of the United States. Give me a break. That's what this boils down to. But we haven't seen the end of it.
I'm not sure I'd be calling your office as my attorney, but thank you for the offer in case I ever need one.
Alan, you could also call me. I've passed the bar.
That's all I would make. I would call Shannon. There's no question.
All right, David, Alan, Guy, great to see you all on a Friday night.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, if any of them needed bail money, they can call. Up next, new setbacks for our current commander-in-chief. How a sluggish economy, a sinking Obamacare, and new revelations surrounding the nuclear deal with Iran are affecting the 2016 race. Charles Krauthammer is here with how all of that could impact Hillary Clinton's chances in November. Plus, Chris Steyerwalt and Rich Lowry are here on breaking details from what really happened after Donald Trump's meeting with the Mexican president. Ooh, it's getting more spicy. That's just ahead.
Look, we're the only ones that know what's going on with illegal immigration. Hillary Clinton has no clue. Not at all. And doesn't care.
Developing tonight, new details emerging about Donald Trump's busy Wednesday that began with that visit to Mexico City. In the aftermath of his meeting with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto, the two men singing a seemingly harmonious tune. Prior to those remarks, the two men had agreed apparently they would not mention paying for the border wall. So Team Trump says they were surprised when Peña Nieto tweeted soon after, quote, "At the beginning of the conversation with Donald Trump, I made clear that Mexico will not pay for the wall." All right, that tweet reportedly angered Trump so much that he reinserted this key line back into his immigration speech.
We will build a great wall along the southern border, and Mexico will pay for the wall. 100%. They don't know it yet, but they're going to pay for the wall. And they're great people and great leaders, but they're going to pay for the wall.
Yikes. All right, joining me now, Chris Steyerwalt, Fox News digital politics editor, and Rich Lowry, editor of National Review and Fox News contributor. Great to see you both.
Hi there.
Hi, Shannon.
All right, Chris, to read the behind the scenes of how they negotiated this whole thing where no one's going to talk about paying for the wall, this is just a first initial meeting, and to hear then that the Mexican president brought it up right away, and Rudy Giuliani, who was there with the Trump side of this, stopped right away, like, no, we're not going to be talking about that. They played so nice at the meeting, or the public part after the meeting, but man, it got ugly really quick after that.
All right, so it seems like the key moment was that Trump was asked the question about, by the way, Mr. Trump, you say that you're going to not just build the wall, but make Mexico pay for it. And here we're talking about, tens of billions of dollars. And Trump said it didn't come up. Didn't come up. The wall didn't come up. And then afterwards, the Mexican president obviously felt obliged to say, well, no, it did come up. I brought it up at the very beginning and told him we wouldn't be paying for it. So this then gets the counterfire from Trump, who says, oh, no, you're going to pay for it. You don't know it yet, but you're going to pay for it. And this is the thing that's challenging when you try to have a bifurcated day like Trump did. Mm-hmm. He wants to have a beginning of his day where he's cool, where he's on the international stage. He's got a nice green backdrop there. It's very mild and mellow. And then he's going to come back to the United States. He's going to go to Arizona. He's going to hang out with Joe Arpaio and Jeff Sessions. He's going to talk hot about illegal immigrants and rapists and murder and all of this stuff, all the hottest language possible. So when you try to do it both ways, you end up having a little bleed over from one to the other.
But Rich, that Wednesday night speech is exactly how he won the primary. Millions of people like what he has to say about immigration. They voted for him. And maybe he felt like after some people were saying he got owned by the president, the Hillary Clinton team was saying, he showed that he doesn't understand how to do foreign policy, and it blew up in his face. What other choice did he have but to go to the wall Wednesday night?
Well, that speech, and I think, Shannon, you're absolutely right, but you have to underline that phrase. It's how he won the primaries. Mm-hmm. And he's now trying to win a general election, which is a different animal. And I thought that speech on the substance was utterly sound and unassailable. But the tone was very much a primary tone. And I think, going to Chris's point about the bifurcated day, if you're going to go to Mexico to look statesmanlike, well, sound statesmanlike in your policy speech in the evening as well. And I think that's where he made a mistake. He shouldn't have given the speech at a rally setting, should have been in front of a think tank audience where he didn't feel obligated to play to the crowd and could have projected much more of a sense of sobriety and restraint, because he's not losing this race on the issues so much. He's losing it on demeanor and the perception that he doesn't have presidential qualities. So it doesn't make any sense to have this lightning strike into Mexico, which works, and where he projects all those qualities, and then to do something totally different at night.
All right, Chris, king of the crosstabs. I want to talk to you about some polling stuff. Fox News Latino poll shows that Hispanic registered voters favored Clinton 66% to Donald Trump's 20%. Is he helping or hurting himself this week?
Okay, look, Donald Trump is not going to win the election with the support of Hispanic voters. That's not how he's going to do this.
But he needs a good chunk of them.
Nah, Mitt Romney only did 25%. Donald Trump's going to do worse with Hispanic voters. He's going to do worse with black voters and all non-white voters, presumably, than Mitt Romney did. His key is that he is trying to juice white turnout. He is trying to juice the turnout of blue-collar white voters who stayed home, by the way. And there is real evidence that blue-collar white voters, especially in the upper Midwest, stayed home. And so he's trying to get there the other way. However, he has to do it with the other part of the Republican coalition, and that's college-educated white voters who vote for him, who are supporting him in large number. But he needs to get back to those Romney-sized numbers with those voters if he wants to do it with the blue-collar whites. The key in the outreach, whether it is with Mexico talking about and cementing his shift on deportations, or whether he's talking to black voters in Detroit or elsewhere, the key is convincing college-educated white voters that he is not racist. He is not what they say he is.
And Rich, quickly before we're out of time, he is making this visit this weekend to Detroit to stop in at an African-American church to be interviewed by the pastor there. What sort of risk reward situation is he walking into there?
Well, it's a little bit like the trip to Mexico. If something blows up, it's going to be really bad. But if he performs ably, it's going to be good for him. And I think anything the campaign can do to get him in different settings where he's not in front of big rally audiences and when he's shouting is very good for him. So I think it's right that they're being a little more imaginative and mixing it up. And now it's a question of whether he can pull it off in performance.
We'll be watching. Rich, Chris, great to see you both.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too. All right, up next, Hurricane Hermine leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. One person is dead, hundreds of thousands still in the dark. We're going to take you on the ground in Florida as that state begins to clean up. Plus, while Obama's approval ratings are sky high, some of his major policies look to be tanking. Should Donald Trump be doing more to tie Hillary Clinton to the current administration's trouble? Charles Krauthammer is here with some surprising recommendations. Next. Breaking tonight, Tropical Storm Hermine surging through the south and marching north ahead of the busy Labor Day weekend. Hermine making landfall on Florida's northwest coast earlier today. Downgraded from a Category 1 hurricane to a tropical storm on its way to the Carolinas. Here's a look at some of the devastation Hermine left in her wake earlier today as she swept through Cedar Key, Florida. That's where Steve Harrigan joins us live tonight with the latest on the storm, the cleanup. And Steve, after your live shots yesterday, I'm just happy to see you are in one piece, safe and sound.
We're all good here, Shannon, but the coast of Florida is a little bit different. You can see here in this palm tree a bit of mattress, some chairs also stuck in that tree. And if you look over here, some of the damage from that 9-foot storm surge. This condominium, you can actually see all the way through from one end all the way out the front. The walls knocked down. This place got pounded by 80-mile-per-hour winds as well as that heavy storm surge. You can see bits and pieces of people's belongings all over the place here. Ironing boards, satellite dishes, pictures, personal belongings. They've been hit pretty hard here, and ordinarily the day after a disaster, you see a lot of activity, people picking through the wreckage, a lot of emergency equipment crews trying to rebuild. We are not seeing that great amount of activity here today. Perhaps that's for a couple of reasons. In some cases like this, maybe the devastation is so complete people are not going to be able to recover at all, but also a sense that maybe they can't get back here, or because the conditions are so difficult. No running water, no electric power. At this hour, more than 220,000 Floridians have no electric power. Some seniors just came up to us a few minutes ago, furious that they're going to spend a second night in the dark here along the coast. Shannon, back to you.
Yeah, I think that includes my parents. But again, safe and sound. Good to hear it. Steve, thank you. Developing tonight as the campaign battle between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton continues to dominate the daily news cycle, President Obama finds himself enjoying his highest approval ratings in years. That's despite a growing list of issues facing some of his administration's most significant policies. First, his signature law, Obamacare, seeing premiums rising sharply and some of the country's biggest insurers threatening to back out. Plus, a shocking new report suggesting his administration gave secret exemptions to the nuclear deal with Iran. And today's disappointing jobs reports, with just 151,000 jobs added, down 45% from last month, coming on the heels of a sluggish GDP report. All this begging the question, should Donald Trump be doing more to portray Hillary Clinton as nothing more than a third Obama term? Joining me now, syndicated columnist and Fox News contributor Charles Krauthammer. Great to see you tonight, Doctor.
Good to be here.
Okay, so, obviously this is always something that you can use in the campaign, the fact that your opponent, tying them to the current administration if they're from the same party, but she was actually part of the administration. Is Trump missing a golden opportunity here?
Well, I'm not sure how golden it is, and the reason is that Obama's own numbers are quite high for someone in the 8th year of his term. It's over 50%, which is pretty unusual. And I think one of the reasons is that he's out of sight. Now, just take, for example, healthcare, which, of course, extremely unpopular, always has been. Well, in the years when he was delivering 37, 38, we lost the track of how many speeches, national addresses on the subject, he was completely associated with it. Well, he hasn't spoken about it for years. In fact, he hasn't sort of been seen for about 6 months or so, because, as you said, the scene, the media coverage, it's all been about the campaign. It's as if the country's been run on autopilot. So the blame attached to the policies is far less than it would be otherwise. Now, this is generally true at the end of 2 terms, but this is all the more true because it's been an unusually, let's say, unusual campaign with a lot of entertainment value, and Obama has sort of faded. So as he fades, his numbers go up, out of sight, out of mind. It doesn't pay as much to go after him. You want to go after her, and that's been Trump's strategy.
Well, and when you think about the fact that she was a member of his team as Secretary of State, and she has been critical of some things that have turned into foreign policy sort of disaster, saying she would have handled them differently. But it seems like Trump has done some connecting her to, obviously the Russian reset, which didn't go quite as smoothly as planned, right. Problems in the Middle East. I mean, does he need to focus on her as an extension of the foreign policy from this administration?
Well, I think the things he's missing is, look, the biggest disaster of the last 8 years in terms of foreign policy was the complete withdrawal from Iraq in 2011, clearly as a way for Obama to clear the way for his re-election campaign. That was a political decision. It was not a strategic decision. And she was in on it. She was Secretary of State. Now, she can say, I gave her different advice in private, but that won't wash. I think that is something where you can tie her to him. Instead, what they did is when we got the news about the ransom that was given, flown, the cash flown into Iran in return for the hostages, they tried to tie her to that, but that occurred after she left office. Any connection between her and that was extremely tenuous. I thought that was a missed opportunity. That was not a credible connection, even though she had initiated negotiations on the nuclear deal years ago. She was not involved in the ransom payment. But I think there are issues, clearly the one about the debacle in Iraq and in Syria as a result of the precipitous withdrawal was something that I think he ought to push on very hard.
And by the way, as you know, Dr. Krauthammer, they're not calling it the R word. They're not calling it a ransom.
Of course.
But people may want to define it that way, but the State Department and this administration continues to say, not a ransom.
But you and I are speaking the truth here, so we do say the word ransom.
I'm going to get out my dictionary. But let's talk about the economy as well, because, we continue to hear, well, hey, unemployment's at 4.9%. Things have improved drastically since President Obama took office. Others say dig into those numbers, the labor participation rate at an all-time low. And they say that there are all kinds of fundamental underpinnings of the economy that are in trouble. How can you link that? Should Trump try to link that to her? I mean, we know what her policy positions are on some of these economic issues. Would that be helpful?
I think it's a little hard to make her responsible for the current condition, but it is not hard at all, and I think it ought to be the essence of the campaign to say that she represents classic liberalism. In fact, she's probably to the left of Obama because she had to run to the left to catch up with Bernie Sanders in the primaries, and we know where the policies have led. We have now gone 8 years. This is the only time in American history we've gone through a presidential term without a single year of growth at 3%. This is unprecedented. And I think what you do is you say she represents the Democratic idea, the Democratic establishment, and the traditional old, completely obsolete and anachronistic Democratic economic plans that go back to the New Deal. It worked in the mid-20th century. It doesn't work now. And do you want to elect that? So I don't think you do this by making the economic argument in terms of blame. What you do is in terms of the future, not the past. This is what the past has brought you, and that's the future she promises you.
All right. Well, we'll see if the Trump campaign is listening to the Kelly File tonight and
I'm
taking
not sure they listen to me.
Dr. Krauthammer's advice.
They may listen to you.
You never know. We'll see. We'll let you know if we hear from him. You let us know if you hear from him, too. Charles, great to see you tonight.
I'm sure I will. Take care.
Thank you. All right, still ahead. Cupcakes at a major university are told not to use certain words that could be offensive to fellow classmates. Plus, the polls tightening between Clinton and Trump as reports surface that Clinton's campaign offices outnumber Trump's 3-1. Does Trump have the ground game necessary to close the gap by Election Day? A fair and balanced debate on that next. With just 67 days to go until the November election, the focus now shifting to the candidates' ground games as staff, advertising, and battleground appearances take on a new importance down the home stretch. Donald Trump finds himself nearly 2 points closer to Clinton than last week. But campaign experts are pointing to some deficiencies in his operation that might make it hard for him to keep up this momentum. Politico proclaiming Mr. Trump's new ad buy is just half of what the campaign had promised. And on top of that, Clinton's campaign offices outnumber Trump's by more than 3-1 across key swing states. Joining us now to discuss it all, Kristen Soltis Anderson, Republican pollster and columnist at the Washington Examiner, and Jason Osborne, a Trump supporter and former communications strategist to Dr. Ben Carson. Great to see you both.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. All right, Kristen, I'll start with you. Unconventional could be a way that we describe the Trump campaign. He plowed through the primary, wiped out 16 other candidates. He has massive crowds showing up. He's picking up in the polls, but nothing about his strategy has been traditional. So should he be worried about getting it in line with what people will argue has worked for general elections in the past?
There are things that Donald Trump has benefited from greatly that have allowed him to be a little bit unconventional thus far. For instance, he gets a ton of media coverage, and he gets it all for free, meaning that while normally candidates have to spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to put their message on the air, Donald Trump has benefited from getting an incredible amount of coverage. But what you can't make up for is ground game, and that's what's really important and where I think the Trump campaign has been lacking. In the 2012 election, Barack Obama's re-election campaign had 780 field offices across the country compared to Mitt Romney's campaign that only had 280. That gap was huge, and it meant that Barack Obama's re-election team could bring out more African-American voters in key places like Ohio. The Trump campaign has got to catch up if they want to turn out all of those voters that they say are sort of the silent Trump voters that are unlikely but could swing to Trump.
Well, and Jason, we're hearing from the RNC that they're going to deploy hundreds of people, that they're going to beef up these important states with extra offices and more ground game. But there have been, as you know all along, many rumors about tension between the RNC, the Trump camp. They just see doing things differently in many cases. Those are always denied, and they resurface again. Do you think he'll take this help from the RNC, and do you think it will work long term for him?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think going back to your point at the beginning of this segment, where you pointed out correctly that during the primary, Donald Trump was outspent hundreds of millions of dollars to virtually nothing. And yet he was still able to generate the movement and get over 13, 14 million votes in a Republican primary. And I think he's able to do the same thing here. I do think there is a concern legitimately that, are we going as a party going to be able to get enough people out to vote? And I think the answer to that, based on particularly on what Reince has said, the chairman of the RNC and the Trump campaign, is that they are teaming up and doing very well together in deploying the old 72-hour program has now become the 2-month program. And I think the enthusiasm is there for Trump. I don't see it there for Hillary.
Yeah, a lot of folks would say that, her appearances are much less well attended. The excitement, the passion is not there. And Kristen, that's something he definitely seems to have harnessed. But honestly, we've been paying attention to this for a year and a half, but it's now Labor Day. Now America's going to start paying attention. I mean, Kristen, does he have a bit of a clean slate as they're going into what is the home stretch now, where people really start to dial in if politics is not their thing?
Well, so normally I would say yes, but this is not a normal election. And here you have two candidates for president who are extremely well known by the public. These are folks that have been in the headlines for decades, for almost my entire lifetime. The Clintons and the Trumps have been in the news. So this is not necessarily a case where you're going to have a lot of voters suddenly learning about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton for the first time when we get into the debates. While you may have had folks first learning about, say, a Mitt Romney or a John Kerry in the debate phase, here these candidates are pretty well known. And so I think it's a cliche to say it comes down to turnout, but it is going to come down to having the actual ground game out there to go find every voter who might consider voting for Donald Trump and knocking on their door and calling them and getting them to the polls. And I'm not quite sure that at this point the campaign has proven that they've invested as much as the Democrats have over the last decade building that kind of machinery.
Certainly the personnel by both the campaigns and the parties very, very different. We're out of time. We got to leave it there. But listen, this campaign has defied all kinds of conventional wisdom. So we'll see if the momentum continues. Jason, Kristen, great to see you both.
Thank you.
Up next, two more institutes of higher learning apparently frowning upon free speech. Namiki Const is here to discuss it, and she is fired up. With just 67 days until we elect our next president, some institutions of higher learning seem to be struggling with the values that have made this democracy so great since its inception. At Rutgers University, for instance, where college dormitories have been outfitted with bulletins advising students to use only, quote, necessary words in order to avoid microaggressions. The guys in the studio are already laughing. I haven't finished reading the intro yet. And at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where new Chancellor Ronnie Green has instituted a non-negotiable respect policy at the school. What language falls under the banned category remains to be seen. Joining me now, Namiki Const, host of The Filter on Sirius XM Progress. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, not joining me.
We're joining each other. Okay, so I'm looking at this posting at Rutgers University, and the university says they didn't post this. This is the resident assistants in the dorms, and they have freedom to post these kinds of things. But you can't use terms like illegal alien. It's recommended that you don't. They warn about micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations if you make someone feel like their point of view is not valid.
I don't even know what that means. To me, I'm just going to start with that.
And I'm pretty sure ISIS doesn't either.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they don't micro assault. Like, they chop your head off. In the real world, this kind of stuff is kind of hard to swallow.
I think that's the issue here, is liberal arts institutions and colleges, the ones that I value and I really believe in, used to embrace differences of opinions, differences of cultures, and they may not always be great. You may have to read a book about something very uncomfortable to read about from 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago. But that helps you critically think. That helps you understand what the world is really like. And when you go out into that real world where the internet exists, you're going to see that there are differences of opinions that are very different than yours. But you're not going to be prepared if you're living in this bubble where you're not allowed to see that type of opinion.
I mean, that is, to me, college is supposed to prepare you for a particular school of study or a particular career that you're pursuing, but also for the real world. And I do not understand how young people are expected to go into a corporate culture, even to be out there, say that they were entrepreneurs and doing something on their own. You still have to interact with people in the real world who you're not going to like.
Right. And it also suppresses people who are feeling some sort of they're being attacked. So if you're somebody who's being attacked, but you're told that you're not allowed.
You're the attacker.
Yeah, that you're the attacker. Or if someone's being hostile towards you, or you're feeling some sort of injustice, but you're told, as a lot of these institutions are saying now, and Rutgers said this in the RAs have issued this condemnation of anything that is not nice. That's literally the language that they used. So if you're not saying something nice, it's not valid. So if you have some sort of critique of something that's been done to you, that doesn't fall in the line of what the RAs are saying you should say. That hurts the victim.
Right.
If you don't have a space where you're free to say and feel what you want, that doesn't mean it's right, but that's what the other side is supposed to do. That's the essence of free press. Right. You might have one perspective, but the other perspective cancels that out.
Yeah, we got to leave it there, but I think this is a conversation that needs to continue. Namiki,
Absolutely.
always good to see you.
Thank you for having me, Shannon.
All right, we will be right back on the Kelly File. Tonight, before we go, some history. On this day in 1944, former President George H.W. Bush came under heavy fire while conducting a bombing run in the Pacific Theater during World War II. His plane was damaged beyond repair, but before crashing into the Pacific, the future president completed his bombing run on a Japanese installation. After bailing from the fiery aircraft, he floated in the Pacific for hours before being rescued by the USS Finback. What we're seeing now is rare footage of that moment. What an amazing man and story. That's it for the Kelly File. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Thank you for watching. And by the way, I did tell Alan Colmes he could call me for Twitter, for bail money. On Twitter, you're telling me just to leave him there. I won't do it. Have a great Labor Day weekend.